The biting December wind howled through the streets of Boston, slicing through Trevor Yates's thin jacket as if it were made of paper. He hunched his shoulders against the cold, one hand gripping his 6-year-old daughter Emma's mitten-clad fingers, the other clutching a worn briefcase containing every job application he'd collected that day. "Daddy, are we almost home?" Emma asked, her small voice nearly lost in the wind. Her nose was red, her blonde pigtails peeking out from beneath a knitted hat that had once been bright pink but was now faded to a dull rose. "Almost, sweetheart. Just 3 more blocks," Trevor assured her, mustering a smile despite the exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. At 32, he hadn't expected to be a single father struggling to make ends meet after his wife Julie's sudden death 2 years ago. The medical bills had drained their modest savings, and the economic downturn had cost him his job as a construction manager 6 months back. They hurried past storefronts decorated with twinkling Christmas lights and elaborate holiday displays. Emma slowed her steps as they passed a toy store window featuring an animated display of elves making toys. "Look, Daddy. That doll looks just like the one I showed you in the catalog," she said, pressing her nose to the glass, her breath creating a small, foggy circle. Trevor swallowed hard. That doll cost nearly as much as their weekly grocery budget. "It sure does, Em. Come on now, it's getting colder." He gently tugged her along, trying to ignore the pang in his chest at not being able to give his daughter the Christmas she deserved. As they turned the corner onto Beacon Street, Trevor noticed a woman standing at the bus stop, shivering violently. She wore only a thin blazer over what appeared to be an expensive but completely inadequate dress for the weather. Her dark hair whipped around her face as she hugged herself, stamping her high-heeled feet against the pavement in a futile attempt to generate warmth. Trevor hesitated only momentarily before making a decision. "Emma, wait here for just a second," he said, positioning her in the doorway of a closed bakery, sheltered from the wind. "I'll be right back, okay? Don't move." Emma nodded solemnly, understanding the seriousness in her father's tone. Trevor approached the woman, who looked up with startled eyes striking blue eyes he couldn't help but notice, even in the dim glow of the streetlights. "Excuse me, madam," he said, already shrugging out of his coat. "You look like you're freezing. Please take my coat." The woman stared at him in disbelief. "I couldn't possibly." "I insist," Trevor said firmly, draping his worn but warm woolen peacoat around her shoulders. It was his best possession, purchased in better times, but he couldn't in good conscience leave someone shivering in this bitter cold. "The next bus isn't for another 40 minutes according to the schedule." "But what about you?" she asked, her teeth chattering despite herself. Trevor glanced back at Emma, waiting patiently. "We only have a few blocks to go. We'll be fine." The woman clutched the coat around herself, the warmth of it bringing instant relief. "I don't know how to thank you. My car broke down and I left my coat in the office and my phone died," she stopped herself. "I'm Lydia Turner." "Trevor Yates," he replied with a polite nod. "And that's my daughter Emma. We really need to get going before she gets any colder." "Of course," Lydia said, her expression a mixture of gratitude and something else, perhaps surprise at this unexpected kindness. "How can I return your coat to you?" Trevor hadn't thought that far ahead. He fished in his pocket and pulled out a slightly crumpled business card from his previous job. He'd been holding on to them, still unable to throw them away despite their outdated information. "My cell number's still the same," he said, handing it to her. "No rush, though. Stay warm." Before Lydia could respond further, Trevor returned to Emma, who was beginning to bounce from one foot to the other to stay warm. He took her hand again, and with a final nod to the woman at the bus stop, they continued their journey home. "Why did you give that lady your coat, Daddy?" Emma asked as they walked briskly along the sidewalk. "Because she was cold and needed it more than I did right now," Trevor answered simply. Emma considered this for a moment. "That was nice of you. You always say we should help people when we can." Trevor smiled down at his daughter, his heart swelling with pride at her understanding. "That's right, Em. We might not have much, but we can still be kind." By the time they reached their small apartment on the third floor of a converted brownstone, Trevor's fingers were numb, and his ears felt like they might break off. But as he helped Emma with her homework and prepared a simple dinner of macaroni and cheese, her favorite, he didn't regret his decision for a moment. The coat could be replaced eventually. The chance to teach his daughter about compassion was priceless. What Trevor didn't know as he tucked Emma into bed that night was that Lydia Turner wasn't just any woman stranded at a bus stop. She was the CEO of Turner Innovations, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in New England. And she never, ever forgot a kindness. Lydia Turner sat in her penthouse apartment, still wrapped in the stranger's coat. The heat was on full blast now, but she couldn't bring herself to take it off just yet. The warmth wasn't merely physical, it came from knowing that in a city of strangers hurrying past with averted eyes, someone had seen her and acted with pure altruism. She smoothed out the business card in her hand. Trevor Yates, construction manager at Boston Metropolitan Developers. She'd do some research tomorrow, find out more about the man who'd given his coat to a complete stranger while his little girl waited in the cold. For now, though, she breathed in the faint scent of cedar, and something else, something honest and unpretentious that clung to the well-worn wool. It reminded her of a world far removed from boardrooms and investment portfolios, a world she sometimes feared she'd lost touch with entirely. The next morning, Trevor was up before dawn as usual. He made Emma's lunch peanut butter and jelly sandwich, apple slices, and a small candy cane as a special treat before waking her for school. The routine was comforting in its familiarity, even as anxiety gnawed at him about his dwindling bank account and the stack of bills on the kitchen counter. "Daddy, where's your big coat?" Emma asked as she munched on her cereal. "It's snowing today." Trevor glanced out the window at the fat flakes drifting lazily past. "I loaned it to someone who needed it, remember? I'll wear my rain jacket with a sweater underneath. It'll be fine." Emma looked skeptical, but didn't argue. After dropping her off at school with a kiss and a promise to be on time for the winter showcase that afternoon, she had a small role as a snowflake. Trevor headed downtown for his first job interview of the day. The interview went well, but the position wouldn't start until after the new year, and the pay was significantly less than what he'd been making before. Still, it was something. Trevor updated his planner with follow-up notes and headed to his next appointment, trying to ignore the cold seeping through his inadequate layers. His phone rang as he was waiting to cross the street. An unknown number. Probably another recruiter, he thought hopefully. "Hello, Trevor Yates speaking. Mr. Yates, this is Lydia Turner. You gave me your coat last night." Trevor was surprised she'd called so soon. "Oh yes, Miss Turner, I hope you got home safely." "I did, thanks to you." "Listen, I'd like to return your coat and properly thank you for your kindness. Would you be available for lunch today?" Trevor hesitated. He had another interview at 2, but nothing during lunch. "I suppose I could meet around noon." "Perfect. There's a cafe called Rosemary's on Commonwealth Avenue. Do you know it?" Trevor knew of it, an upscale place where a sandwich probably cost more than his daily food budget. "I'm familiar with it." "Wonderful. I'll see you at noon." Before Trevor could say anything else, she had hung up. He stared at his phone for a moment, puzzled by the woman's insistence on thanking him in person. Most people would have simply arranged to drop the coat off somewhere convenient. At precisely 12, Trevor entered Rosemary's, feeling distinctly out of place in his slightly worn button-down shirt and the only tie he owned. The maitre d' gave him a once-over that made him acutely aware of his scuffed shoes. "I'm meeting someone," Trevor said quickly. "Lydia Turner." The man's demeanor changed instantly. "Ah, Miss Turner's guest. Please follow me." Trevor was led to a quiet corner table where Lydia sat reading something on a tablet. She looked up as he approached, and Trevor was struck again by her vivid blue eyes. Today, dressed in a simple but obviously expensive charcoal pantsuit, her dark hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She looked poised and professional, a far cry from the shivering woman at the bus stop. "Mr. Yates," she said, standing to greet him. "Thank you for coming." Trevor noticed his coat draped neatly over an adjacent chair. "It was no problem, and please call me Trevor." "Trevor," she repeated with a smile. "Then I'm Lydia." They sat, and Trevor tried not to fidget as a waiter immediately appeared with water and menus. Lydia must have sensed his discomfort because she said, "I've already ordered for both of us, if that's all right. The chef here prepares a wonderful winter risotto that's not on the menu." "Oh." "Sure," Trevor said, relieved not to have to navigate the prices on the menu, which didn't have dollar signs but still featured numbers far higher than he was comfortable with. "I want to thank you properly for last night," Lydia said, her fingers lightly tapping the table. Not many people would give their coat to a stranger, especially when they had their child with them. Trevor shrugged, embarrassed by her focus on what he considered a simple act of decency. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Lydia said firmly. "They wouldn't. I stood at that bus stop for 20 minutes before you came along. Dozens of people walked by, some even making eye contact. No one stopped." Trevor didn't know what to say to that, so he sipped his water. "Your business card says you're a construction manager," Lydia continued. "Are you still with Boston Metropolitan?" The question made Trevor tense slightly. "No, the company downsized about 6 months ago. I've been looking for something new since then." Lydia's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened with interest. "What's your specialty?" "Commercial properties, mostly. I oversaw several office building renovations and a couple of new constructions for tech companies looking to expand in the area." Lydia nodded thoughtfully. "And are you interviewing currently? Having any luck?" Trevor felt increasingly uncomfortable discussing his employment situation with this elegant stranger. "I have a few prospects," he said vaguely. "Thank you again for lunch, but really, the coat was just a small gesture. You don't owe me anything." Lydia seemed about to say something else when their food arrived, steaming bowls of creamy risotto studded with wild mushrooms and truffle shavings. The aroma made Trevor's stomach growl embarrassingly. "Please eat," Lydia encouraged with a smile. "And tell me about your daughter. Emma, right?" "How old is she?" The topic shift was a relief. Trevor relaxed slightly as he talked about Emma, her love of science and art, her recent fascination with space after a school field trip to the planetarium. He found himself sharing how challenging it had been since his wife passed away, navigating fatherhood alone while trying to maintain their financial stability. "She sounds like a remarkable child," Lydia said warmly. "You must be very proud." "I am," Trevor agreed, suddenly realizing he'd eaten his entire meal while talking. He felt a flash of embarrassment at how hungry he must have appeared. "Trevor," Lydia said, her tone turning more serious, "I have a proposition for you. My company, Turner Innovations, is about to begin renovation on a new campus in Cambridge. We're looking for a project manager with commercial experience." Trevor stared at her. "Your company?" Lydia smiled. "Yes, I'm the founder and CEO of Turner Innovations. We develop assistive technology software. The company has grown significantly in the past few years, and we need more space." Trevor's mind raced. Turner Innovations was indeed a well-known name in the tech world. He'd even been part of a bid for one of their earlier office spaces when he was with his former employer. "Are you offering me a job?" he asked carefully. "I'm offering you an interview," Lydia clarified. "Your experience sounds promising, but I'd need to see your portfolio and have you meet with our facilities director. But I have excellent instincts about people, and someone who gives their coat to a stranger in the dead of winter while caring for a child. That speaks to character, and character matters in my company." Trevor hardly knew what to say. The coincidence seemed too perfect, too much like the plot of a movie rather than real life. A small, suspicious part of him wondered if this was some elaborate prank. Seeing his hesitation, Lydia reached into her bag and pulled out a business card of her own heavy cream stock with embossed lettering in navy blue. My direct line is on the back. Call my assistant tomorrow to set up a formal interview. No promises, but I'd like to see if you might be a good fit. Trevor accepted the card, still somewhat dazed. Thank you, I appreciate the opportunity. No, Lydia said, her blue eyes holding his with surprising intensity. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists in unexpected places. The waiter appeared with the check, which Lydia signed without even looking at the total. As they stood to leave, she handed Trevor his coat. Until we meet again, Trevor Yates. Trevor walked out into the winter afternoon, his coat back on his shoulders and a potential lifeline in his pocket. He wasn't sure what had just happened, but for the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope. As promised, Trevor called Lydia's assistant the next day and was surprised to be given an interview slot for the very next morning. He spent the evening after Emma went to bed polishing his portfolio and researching everything he could find about Turner Innovations and their projects. The company's headquarters was in a sleek building downtown, all glass and sustainable materials. Trevor arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in his best suit. His only suit, if he was being honest, his portfolio tucked under his arm. The receptionist directed him to the 14th floor, where he was met by a friendly man in his 50s who introduced himself as Harold Green, the facility's director. Miss Turner speaks highly of you, Harold said as he led Trevor to a conference room, and she's not easily impressed. Trevor wasn't sure how to respond to that. We only met briefly, he said cautiously. Harold gave him a curious look but didn't comment further. The interview was thorough but fair. Trevor walked Harold through his portfolio, explained his management style, and discussed previous challenges he'd overcome on various projects. 2 hours later, after meeting with several other team members, Trevor was escorted to Lydia's office on the top floor. Her workspace was impressive without being ostentatious large windows overlooking the city, clean lines, and surprisingly warm touches like a collection of unusual rocks on a shelf and children's artwork framed on one wall. Trevor, she greeted him, rising from behind a glass desk. How did the interviews go? Well, I think, he replied honestly, you have an impressive operation here. Thank you, we've worked hard to build something meaningful. She gestured for him to sit in one of the chairs facing her desk. Harold was quite impressed with your portfolio. He mentioned you managed the Davis Tech renovation 2 years ago. Trevor nodded. It was a challenging project. The building was historic, so we had to maintain certain elements while modernizing the infrastructure. That's exactly the kind of experience we need, Lydia said. Our new campus includes an old mill building that we want to preserve the character of while making it state-of-the-art internally. They discussed the project in more detail, and Trevor found himself growing excited about the possibilities. It was exactly the kind of challenge he loved, preserving history while creating something new and functional. The position starts immediately, Lydia said finally. The salary is $110,000 annually, with benefits including health insurance, retirement matching, and childcare assistance. She slid a folder across the desk. The full details are in here, including information about our flexible work policy for parents. Trevor stared at the folder, trying to maintain his composure. The salary was nearly 30% more than he'd been making before, and the childcare assistance alone would be life-changing. But something still bothered him. Lydia, he said carefully, this opportunity is incredible and I'm grateful, but I have to ask why me? Is this because of the coat? Because while I appreciate your gratitude, I don't want charity. Lydia's expression turned serious. This isn't charity, Trevor. Yes, your act of kindness is what brought you to my attention, but I wouldn't offer this position to someone who wasn't qualified. Your portfolio and references speak for themselves. Harold would have rejected you immediately if you weren't exceptional at what you do. She leaned forward, hands clasped on the desk. What your kindness did do was make me notice you, make me want to know more about the man who would give his coat to a stranger in the freezing cold. Character matters in business, Trevor. I can teach skills, but I can't teach integrity. Put that way, Trevor found it hard to argue. He'd worked hard to build his reputation in the industry, and his qualifications were solid. When would you need an answer? He asked. Take the weekend to think about it, Lydia said. Call me on Monday with your decision. Trevor thanked her and left, the folder tucked safely in his briefcase. The whole situation felt surreal, like a twist of fate he couldn't have possibly anticipated when he'd approached a shivering woman at a bus stop. That evening, after Emma was in bed, Trevor sat at the kitchen table and went through the offer package meticulously. The benefits were even better than Lydia had outlined. The health insurance would cover Emma's asthma medications completely, and the childcare program included after-school activities until 6 p.m. every weekday, solving a problem that had been plaguing him since Julie died. He thought about what accepting would mean. Financial stability, security for Emma. No more lying awake worrying about how to pay rent if he didn't find work soon. By Sunday night, his decision was made. He called Lydia's direct line first thing Monday morning. I'd like to accept the position, he said when she answered. Excellent, Lydia replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Can you start Wednesday? That would give you tomorrow to tie up any loose ends. Wednesday works perfectly, Trevor agreed. Wonderful. I'll have HR send over the paperwork today. And Trevor, I'm looking forward to working with you. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Trevor dove into his new role with enthusiasm, grateful for the challenging work and the steady paycheck. The project was exactly the kind of complex, meaningful renovation he excelled at, and he quickly earned the respect of his team and colleagues. He saw Lydia occasionally in meetings or passing in the hallways. She was always professional, treating him no differently than any other department head. If anyone knew about their unusual introduction, they never mentioned it, for which Trevor was grateful. He wanted to be judged on his merit, not seen as a charity case or someone who had gotten the job through an unusual connection. December turned to January, and January to February. With his financial situation stabilized, Trevor was able to enroll Emma in a better after-school program and even start setting aside money for her college fund again. They moved to a slightly larger apartment closer to her school, with a second bedroom so Emma didn't have to sleep in what had essentially been a converted dining nook. Life was looking up, and yet Trevor found himself thinking about Lydia often. Not just as his boss, but as the woman with striking blue eyes who had called him when most people would have simply kept the coat. He admired her business acumen, the way she commanded respect without intimidation, and her genuine commitment to creating technology that helped people. But he kept these thoughts to himself. Office romances were complicated at the best of times, and the power dynamic between them made it even more inappropriate. Besides, women like Lydia Turner, brilliant, successful, undoubtedly wealthy, didn't date men like him. The gap between their worlds was too wide, or so he thought, until the day of the project's midpoint review. The team had been working tirelessly to stay on schedule despite several unexpected challenges with the old mill building's foundation. Trevor had put in extra hours, sometimes working through weekends to ensure they remained on track. The review meeting was crucial. The board of directors would be present, and Trevor would be presenting the progress report. He had just finished a successful presentation when Lydia approached him as the room was clearing. "Impressive work, Trevor," she said. "The board is pleased with how you've handled the foundation issues." "Thank you," he replied, gathering his materials. "It's been a team effort." Lydia lingered, seemingly hesitant, a rare state for her. "I was wondering if you might be free for dinner tomorrow evening. There are some aspects of the next phase I'd like to discuss in more detail." Trevor was surprised by the invitation, but quickly recovered. "Of course. Should I bring the preliminary designs for the East Wing?" "Actually," Lydia said, a slight flush coloring her cheeks, I was thinking we could discuss it away from the office. Perhaps at Vincenzo's at 7. Vincenzo's was one of the most exclusive restaurants in Boston, known for its intimate atmosphere and month-long waiting list. Trevor stared at her, trying to process what seemed to be happening. "That sounds more like a date than a business meeting," he said before he could stop himself. Lydia held his gaze steadily. "Yes, it does, doesn't it?" The directness of her response caught him off guard. "Lydia, I'm not sure that's appropriate given our working relationship." "I understand your concern," she said quietly. "And I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't think we could maintain professionalism regardless of the outcome. But I've found myself thinking about you often, Trevor, not just as a project manager." Trevor felt a surge of conflicting emotions: attraction, caution, hope. What about company policy? "There's no policy against it, as long as it's disclosed to HR, but I understand if you're not comfortable with the idea." Trevor took a deep breath, considering his response carefully. "I would need to find someone to watch Emma." Lydia's face brightened. "So that's a yes." "It's a yes," Trevor confirmed, surprised by his own courage, "but I have one condition." "What's that?" "Let me pay for my own meal. If we're going to start something, I need us to be equals, not boss and employee, at least outside of work." Lydia's smile widened. "I can respect that. Though I should warn you, Vincenzo's is ridiculously overpriced." "I'll manage," Trevor said with a confidence he didn't entirely feel, but the principle mattered to him. "Tomorrow at 7 then," Lydia said. "I look forward to it." As she walked away, Trevor tried to process what had just happened. He had a date, an actual date, with Lydia Turner. The woman who had somehow turned a simple act of kindness into a complete redirection of his life's path. Emma was thrilled when Trevor told her he needed a babysitter for the following evening. "Is it a date, Daddy?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. "Are you going to wear your special tie, the blue one Mom gave you?" Trevor couldn't help but laugh at her enthusiasm. "Yes, it's a date, and yes, I was thinking of wearing the blue tie." "Who is she? Is she pretty? Where did you meet her?" Emma fired questions rapidly as Trevor made dinner. "Her name is Lydia. She's my boss, actually, but we met before I started working for her." He paused, stirring the pasta sauce. "And yes, she's very pretty." "Is she nice?" Emma asked, suddenly serious. Trevor thought about how Lydia had created a company focused on developing technology to help people with disabilities. How she'd insisted on preserving the historic aspects of the mill building rather than demolishing it, as some board members had suggested. How she remembered the names of the custodial staff and asked about their families. "She's very nice," he assured his daughter. "You'd like her?" Emma seemed satisfied with that answer. "Maybe I can meet her someday." "Maybe," Trevor agreed, though the thought made him nervous. He wasn't ready to think that far ahead yet. The next evening, Mrs. Rodriguez from 2 doors down arrived to watch Emma, bearing homemade cookies and promising a Disney movie marathon. Trevor kissed Emma goodbye, straightened his blue tie one last time, and headed out into the February night. Vincenzo's was as elegant as its reputation suggested: soft lighting, white tablecloths, and discreet servers who moved almost invisibly between tables. Lydia was already seated when he arrived, wearing a simple black dress that managed to be both sophisticated and alluring. "You look beautiful," Trevor said as he sat across from her. "Thank you," Lydia replied with a genuine smile. "That tie brings out your eyes." Their conversation flowed easily as they moved beyond the boundaries of their professional relationship. Trevor learned that Lydia had built her company from scratch after developing software to help her younger brother, who had cerebral palsy, communicate more easily. She'd been married briefly in her 20s to her college sweetheart, but the relationship had faltered under the pressure of her growing business. "He wanted me to choose between my company and our marriage," she explained. "I couldn't give up something that was helping so many people, not even for love." "That's a difficult choice to have to make," Trevor said sympathetically. "It was," Lydia agreed. "But looking back, I think we were too young, too different in our goals. What about you?" Have you dated since your wife passed? Trevor shook his head. Between grieving, being a single dad, and then losing my job, it hasn't exactly been a priority, or at least that's what I tell myself. And what's the real reason? Lydia asked perceptively. Trevor considered the question honestly. Fear, I suppose. Fear of opening up again, of being vulnerable, and practical concerns to finding someone who understands that Emma will always come first. Lydia nodded thoughtfully. That's understandable. Your devotion to your daughter is one of the things I admire about you. They continued talking through appetizers and entrees, discovering shared interests in architecture, historical preservation, and surprisingly, vintage science fiction novels. Trevor found Lydia easy to talk to, intelligent without being condescending, confident without arrogance, and genuinely interested in his thoughts and experiences. When the check came, Trevor insisted on paying his portion despite Lydia's protest. We had an agreement, he reminded her. Equals, remember? She conceded with grace. Equals it is, though next time I'm taking you somewhere less exorbitant. Next time? Trevor asked with a smile. If you're amenable, Lydia replied, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. I'm very amenable, Trevor assured her. Outside the restaurant, snowflakes had begun to fall, dusting Lydia's dark hair with tiny crystals that caught the light. Trevor fought the urge to brush them away. May I walk you to your car? He asked. Actually, I took a rideshare here, Lydia admitted. I thought I might have a glass of wine. Then let me drive you home, Trevor offered. They walked to his car, a modest sedan that he'd recently purchased to replace his ancient truck, now that he could afford reliable transportation. Trevor opened the passenger door for her, acutely aware of the contrast between his practical vehicle and what she was likely accustomed to. But Lydia made no comment as she settled in, seemingly comfortable in his space. As he drove through the snowy streets, following her directions to her building in Back Bay, they continued their conversation as if reluctant to end the evening. When they arrived, Trevor walked her to the entrance of her building, an elegant pre-war structure with a doorman and ornate architectural details. I had a wonderful time tonight, Lydia said, turning to face him. So did I, Trevor replied honestly. Thank you for taking a chance. Lydia smiled, snowflakes still catching in her dark hair. Some chances are worth taking. There was a moment of anticipation as they stood there, the city quiet around them, snowflakes swirling in the glow of the streetlights. Trevor hesitated, mindful of their professional relationship and the complications it presented. Lydia solved his dilemma by leaning forward and pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek. Good night, Trevor, she whispered. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night, Lydia, he replied, watching as she disappeared into the building. Driving home, Trevor felt a mixture of elation and caution. The evening had been perfect, far better than he had anticipated, but the reality of their situation remained complex. She was his boss, wealthy and influential. He was a single father, still rebuilding his life after profound loss. The potential for complications was enormous, and yet, as he checked on a sleeping Emma and prepared for bed himself, Trevor couldn't deny the connection he'd felt with Lydia. It had been so long since he'd experienced that spark of possibility, that flutter of anticipation about seeing someone again. Maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. The following weeks saw Trevor and Lydia navigating their dual relationship with careful consideration. At work, they maintained strictly professional interactions, with no one but HR aware of the change in their personal relationship. Outside of work, they began seeing each other regularly: dinners, walks along the waterfront, an afternoon at the Museum of Fine Arts. Their third date was a turning point. Lydia had suggested a cooking class, and they'd spent the evening learning to make fresh pasta, laughing at their mistakes and working together to create something delicious. Afterward, in the parking lot, their goodbye kiss had deepened into something more passionate, leaving them both breathless and reluctant to part. I should get home to Emma, Trevor had said regretfully. Of course, Lydia had agreed, though her eyes had conveyed her desire for more time together. It was after their 5th date that Trevor finally felt ready to take another significant step. They'd just returned from watching a local jazz ensemble, and Trevor found himself not wanting the evening to end. "Would you like to meet Emma?" he asked suddenly as they sat in his car outside Lydia's building. Lydia looked surprised, then pleased. "I'd love to. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Trevor nodded. "She's been asking about you, and you're becoming important to me, Lydia." "Emma is the most important person in my life, and I want you two to know each other." "Thank you for trusting me with that," Lydia said softly. "It means a lot." They arranged for Lydia to join them for Sunday brunch at Trevor's apartment that weekend. Trevor spent Saturday cleaning frantically while Emma bounced around with excitement. "Is she going to be my new mommy?" Emma asked as she helped Trevor set the table Sunday morning. Trevor nearly dropped the plate he was holding. "Whoa, slow down there, kiddo. Lydia and I are just getting to know each other, and no one could ever replace your mom, you know that." Emma nodded seriously. "I know, but Mommy told me before she went to heaven that she wanted us both to be happy, and you're happier now, Daddy. You smile more." Trevor knelt down to Emma's level, touched by her perception. "You're right, I am happier, and a big part of that is because things are better for us both, but part of it is Lydia too. I like her very much, but this is still new, okay?" "Okay," Emma agreed, "but I think I'll like her too." When Lydia arrived precisely at 11, bearing a small potted plant for their apartment and a beautifully wrapped package that turned out to contain a space-themed science kit for Emma, Trevor felt a surge of nervousness. This meeting mattered more than he'd anticipated. But he needn't have worried. Lydia approached Emma with genuine warmth, getting down to her level and asking about her interests, without the condescending tone adults sometimes used with children. By the time they sat down to the French toast and fruit Trevor had prepared, Emma was chattering away about her school science project and the solar system mobile she was building. "Did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons?" Emma asked Lydia as she carefully cut her French toast. "I didn't know the exact number," Lydia admitted. "That's very impressive. Daddy and I are going to make a model of Jupiter for my project. We're using a rubber ball and paper mache." "That sounds wonderful," Lydia said. "I used to love making paper mache projects with my brother when we were kids." "You have a brother?" Emma asked, immediately interested. "I do. His name is Lucas, and he's 3 years younger than me." "Does he live here in Boston, too?" "He does. He works with me at my company, actually. He helps test our software to make sure it works well for people with special needs. Because he has Cereb." Emma looked to Trevor for help. "Cerebral palsy," Trevor supplied. "Yes, it makes it hard for him to talk and move sometimes, but he's very smart and creative," Lydia explained. Emma nodded thoughtfully. "There's a boy in my class who uses a wheelchair. He's really good at math." The conversation continued naturally, with Emma gradually revealing more about her life and interests, and Lydia responding with genuine engagement. Trevor watched them interact, feeling a sense of rightness that he hadn't expected. When Emma asked if Lydia would help with the Jupiter model, and Lydia enthusiastically agreed to join them the following weekend, Trevor felt something shift in his heart. After brunch, Emma insisted on showing Lydia her room, proudly pointing out her books, the star chart on her ceiling, and the small table where she did her art projects. Trevor hung back, watching as Lydia admired everything with authentic interest, asking questions that showed she was truly paying attention. "She's remarkable," Lydia said to Trevor later, after Emma had gone to have her quiet reading time, a Sunday afternoon tradition. "Smart, kind, curious." "You're doing an amazing job with her, Trevor." "Thank you," he replied, touched by her observation. "She likes you, I can tell." "I like her too," Lydia said with a soft smile. "Very much." They sat together on Trevor's modest couch, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, creating a peaceful moment that felt significant in ways Trevor couldn't quite articulate. Lydia's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I'm falling for you, Trevor Yates," she said quietly, her blue eyes meeting his with characteristic directness. "And I think I might be falling for your daughter, too." The admission made Trevor's heart race. It had been so long since he'd allowed himself to feel this way, to imagine a future that included someone other than just him and Emma. "I'm falling for you too," he admitted. "And it scares me a little." "What are you afraid of?" Lydia asked, her thumb tracing patterns on his palm. Trevor considered the question carefully. That our worlds are too different, that eventually the novelty of dating a single dad with a modest life will wear off. Lydia's expression turned serious. "Trevor, what attracted me to you wasn't novelty. It was your character, your integrity, your devotion to Emma. Those things don't wear off." She paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Money changes circumstances, not people. Who we are at our core, that's what matters. And who you are is exactly what I've been looking for without even realizing it." Her words touched something deep in Trevor, addressing fears he'd barely acknowledged to himself. He leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle, tender kiss that conveyed his gratitude and growing feelings better than words could. The following weekend, as promised, Lydia joined them to work on Emma's Jupiter project. She arrived in jeans and an old sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, ready to get messy with paper mache. They spread newspapers across the kitchen table, mixed flour and water into paste, and spent the afternoon laughing and creating together. Emma was delighted with Lydia's suggestion to add texture to Jupiter's great red spot, and her patience in helping attach the small moons they'd made from clay. By the time they'd finished, all three of them were splattered with dried paper mache. The kitchen was a disaster, and Jupiter was drying on the counter, looking remarkably like the gas giant it represented. "This was the most fun I've had in ages," Lydia declared as she helped Trevor clean up while Emma took a bath. "Seriously, board meetings and investor pitches have nothing on paper mache planets." Trevor laughed, passing her a dish towel. "You're covered in flour, you know. It's in your hair." "Worth it," Lydia replied with a grin. "Emma's face when we got those rings positioned just right, priceless." Trevor paused in his cleaning, struck by how naturally Lydia had fit into their day, how effortlessly she'd connected with Emma, and how much joy her presence had brought to their small apartment. "What are you thinking?" Lydia asked, noticing his expression. "That I'm really glad you forgot your coat that night at the bus stop," Trevor replied honestly. Lydia's smile softened. "So am I. Best mistake I ever made." As winter turned to spring, Trevor and Lydia's relationship deepened. They settled into a comfortable rhythm, seeing each other several times a week, often including Emma in their activities on weekends. Lydia introduced Trevor to her brother Lucas, who immediately hit it off with both Trevor and Emma. In turn, Trevor introduced Lydia to his small circle of friends, who welcomed her warmly. The renovation project at Turner Innovations continued on schedule, with Trevor's team making excellent progress on the complex restoration work. His professional reputation grew, and he found himself being consulted on other projects within the company, his expertise valued and respected. One evening in April, nearly 4 months after they'd begun dating, Lydia invited Trevor to her apartment for dinner after work. It was the first time he'd been to her home without Emma, and he found himself both nervous and excited as he rode the elevator to her floor. Lydia's apartment was exactly what he'd expected, elegantly appointed but comfortable, with large windows overlooking the city and walls lined with bookshelves. What surprised him were the personal touches. Photographs of her with Lucas, artwork that looked like it had been chosen for meaning rather than investment value, and a worn stuffed bear sitting in a place of honor on a shelf. "That's Bernard," Lydia explained, following his gaze. "He was my childhood teddy bear. He's been with me through everything: college, my first failed startup, divorce, success. I know it's silly to keep him out like that at my age." "It's not silly at all," Trevor said, touched by this glimpse of vulnerability from a woman who presented such strength to the world. We all need anchors to our past. Dinner was delicious. Lydia had prepared her grandmother's lasagna recipe, admitting with a laugh that it was one of the only things she could cook well. They ate at her dining table, candles flickering between them, the conversation flowing easily as always. After dinner, they moved to her couch, glasses of wine in hand. Lydia seemed slightly nervous, which was unusual for her. "Trevor, there's something I want to discuss with you," she began, setting her glass down carefully. Trevor felt a flicker of apprehension. "That sounds serious." "It is, but not in a bad way. At least I hope not." Lydia took a deep breath. "The mill renovation is nearly complete. Your team has done extraordinary work, and the project is coming in under budget and ahead of schedule." "Thank you," Trevor said, uncertain where this was going. "The team has been exceptional." "Yes, they have, and so have you." Lydia paused. "Which is why the board wants to offer you a permanent position as our Director of Facilities and Expansion. We're growing rapidly, with plans for additional campuses in New York and Chicago within the next 2 years. We want you to oversee all of it." Trevor stared at her, processing the offer. It was an incredible opportunity, a significant promotion that would mean long-term security for him and Emma. "I'm honored," he said finally. "But would I still report to you?" Lydia shook her head. "No. You'd report directly to the board. I've recused myself from all decisions regarding your employment to avoid any conflict of interest." She reached for his hand. "This is based entirely on your merit, Trevor. The board doesn't even know we're dating." Trevor's mind raced with the implications. A director-level position would mean more responsibility, more travel potentially, but also greater financial security and professional growth. "I'd need to think about it," he said carefully. "Especially the travel aspect." "Emma, of course," Lydia said quickly. "Take all the time you need." "And the travel can be minimized, especially while Emma is young. We're very flexible about that sort of thing." Trevor nodded, grateful for her understanding. "It's an amazing opportunity. Thank you for believing in me." "Always," Lydia said softly. She hesitated, then continued, "There's something else I wanted to talk about, something personal." Trevor set his wine glass down, giving her his full attention. "These past months with you and Emma have been the happiest of my life," Lydia said, a vulnerability in her voice he rarely heard. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want for my future, what really matters. And what I've realized is that all my success, all the accolades and achievements, they mean nothing without someone to share them with." Trevor felt his heart begin to race, sensing where this conversation might be heading. "I love you, Trevor," Lydia said simply. "And I love Emma too. I'm not proposing not yet anyway. That would be rushing things. But I wanted you to know how I feel, and that I'm in this for the long haul, if you are." Trevor was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by her declaration. For so long after Julie died, he'd believed that part of his life was over, that his heart had room only for his daughter and the memory of his late wife. But Lydia had changed that, awakening feelings he'd thought dormant forever. "I love you too," he said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. "And I think Julie would approve. She always wanted Emma and me to be happy." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "That means everything to me." Trevor pulled her close, kissing her with all the emotion he felt. Their relationship had begun with an act of simple kindness on a cold winter night, and had grown into something neither of them had expected, but both now treasured. Later that evening, as they lay together in Lydia's bedroom, Trevor found himself thinking about how dramatically his life had changed in just a few months. From struggling to make ends meet and fearing for his and Emma's future, to finding not only financial security, but love as well. "What are you thinking about?" Lydia asked, her head resting on his chest. "How different my life is now compared to the night I gave you my coat," he admitted. "It feels like a lifetime ago." Lydia propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Do you ever regret it?" "Getting involved with me, I mean. It's complicated things for you professionally." Trevor shook his head without hesitation. Not for a second. Some complications are worth it. Lydia smiled, settling back against him. I've been thinking, she said after a moment, about where we go from here. What do you mean? Well, we're at your place half the time, my place the other half. Emma has to pack up her things whenever she stays here. It seems inefficient. Trevor chuckled. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Maybe, Lydia said, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Would you be open to discussing it? Not immediately, but soon, finding a place together. The idea both excited and terrified Trevor. It was a massive step, especially with Emma to consider. And yet, it made sense in many ways. Emma adored Lydia, the three of them functioned well together, and the constant back and forth between apartments was becoming increasingly impractical. I think it's worth discussing, he said carefully, but we'd need to make sure Emma is completely comfortable with the idea. And we'd need to find somewhere that feels like home to all of us, not your place or my place, but our place. Lydia nodded against his chest. I agree completely, and we can take our time, do it right. She paused. Thank you for considering it, for being open to building a life with me. Trevor kissed the top of her head, marveling at how this extraordinary woman had come into his life through such an ordinary act of kindness. Thank you for forgetting your coat, he murmured. 2 weeks later, Trevor accepted the position as Director of Facilities and Expansion at Turner Innovations. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and, as promised, flexibility that allowed him to prioritize Emma's needs. He discussed it thoroughly with Emma first, explaining that he might occasionally need to travel for a few days at a time. But who will take care of me when you're gone? Emma had asked. Well, that's something we need to figure out, Trevor had replied honestly. Maybe Mrs. Rodriguez, or maybe Lydia, Emma had suggested hopefully. The question had taken Trevor by surprise. Would you be okay with that? With Lydia staying here with you if I had to travel? Emma had nodded enthusiastically. I like when Lydia stays over. She helps me with my science homework, and she makes funny voices when she reads stories. Trevor had been touched by Emma's easy acceptance of Lydia in their lives. It made the conversations about potentially moving in together seem less daunting. In May, they began casually looking at houses in neighborhoods with good schools, not rushing but exploring their options. They agreed that a house would be better than an apartment room for Emma to play. Maybe a yard, space for Trevor's small woodworking hobby and Lydia's growing collection of books. It was during one of these casual house hunting expeditions that they founded a Victorian-style home in a tree-lined neighborhood, with a wraparound porch, a backyard perfect for a swing set, and an interior that needed some updating but had beautiful bones. It's too expensive, Trevor said immediately when he saw the listing price, despite his improved financial situation. It's within our combined budget, Lydia countered. And think of it as an investment. With your skills, we could update it gradually and increase its value. Our combined budget, Trevor repeated, still uncomfortable sometimes with the disparity in their financial situations. Lydia took his hand. Partners share, Trevor. I'm not looking to keep score or maintain separate accounts. What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. That's how it works when you're building a life together. Her words resonated with him, challenging his pride while affirming her commitment. Let's at least look at it, he conceded. The house was even better in person. Emma ran from room to room excitedly, already planning where her bed would go and which room would be best for a reading nook. The real estate agent pointed out features and flaws alike, but Trevor could already see the potential what walls could come down to create a more open layout, how the kitchen could be modernized while preserving its vintage charm. Standing in what would be the master bedroom, looking out at the maple tree in the backyard, Trevor felt Lydia's arm slip around his waist. What do you think? She asked softly. I think Emma loves it, he replied, and I can see why. It has character, potential, and you. Could you see us here, building a life together? Trevor turned to face her, struck again by how this remarkable woman had entered his life through such a simple act. "Yes," he said honestly. "I can see us here. I can see us building something special." Lydia's face lit up with a smile that made his heart swell. "Then, let's make an offer." 2 months later, on a warm July afternoon, Trevor stood on the porch of their new home, watching as the movers carried in the last of the furniture. Emma was inside, directing the placement of her bed with adorable seriousness. Lydia was in the kitchen, unpacking dishes and arranging them in cabinets that Trevor had refinished himself over the past few weekends. It still felt surreal sometimes, how dramatically his life had changed. From that freezing December night, when he'd given his coat to a shivering stranger, to today moving into a beautiful home with a woman he loved deeply, and who loved both him and his daughter with equal devotion. "Penny for your thoughts," Lydia said, appearing in the doorway and handing him a glass of lemonade. Trevor smiled, accepting the cool drink gratefully. "Just reflecting on how we got here. It's been quite a journey." Indeed it has," Lydia agreed, leaning against the porch railing beside him. "A journey that started because my car broke down and I was too stubborn to call a car service. You were freezing," Trevor recalled. "I couldn't just walk by." "Most people did," Lydia reminded him, "but not you." Not Trevor Yates, who gave his coat to a stranger even though he had a little girl waiting in the cold. Trevor shrugged, still uncomfortable with praise for what he considered simple human decency. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Lydia said firmly. "They wouldn't. And that's why I fell in love with you. Because you're the kind of man who gives his coat to a stranger without a second thought." Trevor set down his lemonade and pulled her into his arms. "And you're the kind of woman who turns a simple kindness into an opportunity to change someone's life. Who sees value where others might not look." Lydia leaned into him, her arms wrapping around his waist. "We make a good team, don't we?" "The best," Trevor agreed, kissing the top of her head. From inside the house came Emma's voice, calling for them both to come see how she'd arranged her stuffed animals on her new bed. They pulled apart, exchanging smiles filled with contentment and promise. "Coming, sweetheart," Lydia called back. As they walked into their new home together, hand in hand, Trevor thought about the countless small decisions and chances that had led to this moment. A cold night, a forgotten coat, an act of kindness, such simple things, yet they had changed everything. And as Emma proudly showed them her carefully arranged room, her face alight with happiness, Trevor knew with absolute certainty that the journey they'd begun that December night was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning a journey they would continue together, as a family, building a life rich with love, kindness, and possibility. That night, after Emma was asleep in her new bedroom, Trevor and Lydia sat on their porch swing, enjoying the summer evening and the satisfaction of their first day in their new home. Fireflies blinked in the yard, and somewhere a neighbor was playing soft music that drifted through the warm air. "I have something for you," Lydia said, reaching beside the swing and pulling out a wrapped package. "What's this?" Trevor asked, surprised. "You've already given me more than enough." Lydia shook her head. "This is different, just open it." Trevor unwrapped the package to find a familiar coat, his coat, the one he'd given her that winter night, now professionally cleaned and carefully preserved. "I thought you might want it back," Lydia said softly, "for when winter comes again." Trevor ran his hand over the familiar wool. "You kept it all this time?" "Of course I did," Lydia replied. "It was the first gift you ever gave me, the beginning of our story." Trevor felt emotion well up in his throat. He set the coat aside and took both her hands in his. "Lydia Turner, I love you. More than I ever thought I could love anyone again." "I love you too," she whispered, under the stars, on the porch of the home they would share. Trevor kissed her a kiss filled with gratitude for the past, joy in the present, and hope for the future. A future that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a cold winter night, when a struggling single father gave his coat to a freezing woman. A millionaire who never forgot.